The elements are a powerful thing. In many ways, the world revolves around the four basic elements: fire, water, air, and earth. These elements are incredible forces of nature, and in many civilizations, these forces have become part of mythology, with elements corresponding to different deities. These deities are then appeased or angered, which can cause great unrest or vigor, destruction or creation. In a number of South American cultures, as well as around the world, deities who are associated with the elements tend to also be creation gods, those who are responsible for the creation of the world and its many wonders and splendors. Creation deities are different depending on the culture, usually in name, so for the purposes of exploring the creation deities and their stories, acts, and level of reverence, we will be taking a look at a few South American cultures with notable stories related to deities of the elements. And what better place to start than with the Incas? The Inca mythology houses a large variety of deities supporting areas of everyday life, everywhere including Mama Sara, the goddess of grain, to Urcaguari, the god of metals, jewels, and other underground items of great value. But when it comes to the elements, water dominates in terms of creation. The Inca have their own flood myth, the Unapachacuti. In this myth, the Inca's supreme being and creator god, Kontiki Viracocha, first created a race of giants, but they were unruly, so he destroyed them in a mighty flood and turned them to stone. Following the deluge, he created human beings from smaller stones. In other versions of this story, the impious race is the pre-Inca civilization of the Tiahuanaco Indians around Lake Titicaca, the large high lake in the Andes. Viracocha drowns them and spares two, a man and a woman, to start the human race anew. Some versions of the Unapachacuti have the surviving man and woman floating to Lake Titicaca in a wooden box. Many cultures have their own flood myths as part of their creation as well. For instance, the Muisca people near Bogota, Colombia, have their own flood myth, as well as their own story of the origin of the universe. In terms of how the world began, the world started with chimi, the pulp, the first material object in the world. Then, in the inners of Tomsa, were incubated the embryos of stars, embryos of land, and embryos of stone. When Tomsa was full, the seeds of the earth emerged and the remains were thrown away, forming the Milky Way. The elements were distributed to the deities, the heat to Sua, the sun, the cold to Chia, the moon, and the clouds and the smoke to the earth. But all the things were still seeds and nothing was germinated. Then, Minya, gold, energy, was united with Chimi, the pulp, and became Chimini, the creative force which caused the germination of the seeds of all things, related to the Trinity deity of Chiminagagua. The Muisca Great Flood myth tells of a bearded man named Bochica, later known as the father of civilization, who came from the east. He taught the primitive Chibcha people ethical and moral norms and gave them a model by which to organize their states, with one spiritual and one secular leader. Bochica also taught the people agriculture, metalworking, and other crafts before leaving for the west to live as an ascetic. When the Chibcha later forsook the teachings of Bochica and turned to a life of excess, Chibchacham, the one who holds the earth, created a flood which engulfed the savanna of Bogota, where they lived. Upon appealing for the aid from their hero, Bochica returned on a rainbow and with a strike from his staff, created the Tequendama Falls, through which the floodwaters could drain away. In central Brazil, the Caraya people also tell of a great flood. The great deity Anatiwa created a deluge that engulfed the world. Because of this, the ancestors of the people have been said to have lived in an underworld, until one day one of them climbed up a hole in the ground, and out into the surface of the earth, where his fellow tribesmen later followed and where they eventually settled. In many of these stories, Earth also plays a role in creation, either serving as a protector or as the original source of man. However, the element of air also has an origin story for a South American people. The Waro are an indigenous people inhabiting northeastern Venezuela and western Guyana, and the name Waro translates as the boat people, mostly living around the Orinoco Delta region. Their creation myth is rather interesting and may seem familiar to some people. The Waro believed men first lived in a sky world where the only animals were birds. Then one day, an adventurous heavenly figure known as the Primordial Hunter used his bow and arrow to strike a bird in mid-air. The bird fell from the sky and eventually hit the heavenly floor, but the bird burst through the floor and proceeded through the clouds towards terrestrial land below, Earth. The hunter went to the hole in the floor made by the bird and looked through. He saw lush and fertile land, and resolved to descend to it to partake of its pleasures, beauty, abundant game, fruit, etc. The hunter took a long rope of heavenly cotton, tied it to a tree, and threw it through the hole and lowered himself down through the clouds to what is now known as Venezuela. There he was ultimately joined by his followers, who finally decided to abandon the sky world and settle permanently on Earth. Now, while it may seem that elements coincide with each other in passive ways, there are stories where elements become rivals and are hostile to each other, causing great calamities to the land. One such story comes from the Mapuche people of south-central Chile and southwestern Argentina. Their deities mainly consist of spirits and odd creatures. For instance, the Mapuche people have a legend about the Nugravilu, or fox snake, a river-dwelling creature with a long tail with fingernails that it uses like a claw, but it's a water being. They live in and are the cause of dangerous whirlpools which kill people who try to cross rivers. The creature makes the water shallow on either ford to encourage people to try to cross it, making it seem safe. However, the only safe way of crossing a river with a Nugravilu is by boat, until removed by a shaman or a good sorcerer. There is also a legend of the origin of the geography of the Chilean archipelago and mountains of southern Chile, called the legend of Vilu and Vilu, two mythical snakes who had a fierce battle. The Vilu is the god of Earth, and is a generous spirit and protector of all Earth's life. Vilu is a god of water, and the origin of all that inhabits and rules the seas. According to this myth, thousands of years ago, what is now the Chiloé province was once one contiguous landmass with continental Chile. One day, a monstrous serpent appeared and inundated the lowlands, valleys, and mountains, submerging all the flora and fauna. Vilu. Without delay, Vilu appeared to start a confrontation with his enemy, elevating the land and protecting it from disaster. The battle persisted a long time. Vilu ultimately reached a costly victory. He won the battle, but was unable to restore the land to its primeval state, leaving it in a dismembered form it still has today. But you might be saying to yourself, where's the fire in all of this? Well, the Mapuche people also have a creature of this element known as the Cherife, a humanoid of rock and magma. It is said that Cherife inhabits the magma pools found deep within Chilean volcanoes, and are the source of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The only way to abate the Cherife's appetite for destruction was to satiate the beast's taste for human flesh by throwing a sacrificial victim into the bowels of its volcanic home. Now, in addition, many cultures, on top of the elements, have a great deity or spirit that encompasses all the elements, a kind of supreme being. The Mapuche people have this kind of system with the Nigen spirits, spirits of nature, that take on forms based on humans, animals, and plants. If a Mapuche needs to obtain something from nature, they must respect and give an offering to the specific Nigen spirit. Nigen spirits cover many areas, including the main elements, hills or volcanoes, the forest, animals, medicinal herbs, stones, and the paths created by nature or the footsteps of wild animals, in addition to the main deity who governs human beings. In this way, the spirits work together to provide stability and equilibrium in the world. In addition to these people, the Inca also have their own great god, mentioned before, Viracocha, one of the most important deities in the Incan pantheon, and is seen as the creator of all things, or the substance from which all things are created and intimately associated with the sea. Viracocha created the universe, the sun, moon, stars, and even time by commanding the sun to move over the sky, and civilization itself. Deities are not necessarily simple in South American cultures. Depending on the culture you look at, you will find numerous deities with overlapping responsibilities and domains, including the elements themselves. However, this does not make them any less important to the people who worship them, as the stories that have been told about these great spirits and more continue to echo throughout history.